Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic, host of Bachelor Nation News, and we've got Nick Viall and his girlfriend, Natalie Joy, on the Call Her Daddy podcast, exclusively available only on Spotify. I'm going to play a few clips for you guys, and a pretty interesting conversation. I find Call Her Daddy to be interesting, not necessarily in her interview techniques, but actually her whole story is fascinating. Follow me on Instagram at dneals and also patreon.com/Dave Neal for behind-the-scenes content. So let's just play the trailer here, and then I'm going to play a couple clips for you.
Welcome. You guys are the first couple that has ever come on Call Her Daddy. Do you guys know each other's love languages?
All of them. Mine are all of them.
Hers are all.
Natalie, you can't have all of them.
I didn't want to know anything he had to say. I was just letting him know that I like you, I want to date you, and he said no. Yeah.
What are some pet peeves you have about each other?
The list.
Natalie, no. Have you guys ever hit a lull in your sex life? What is some baggage you brought into
All right,
this
so
relationship?
this trailer, they don't really get to the answer, so we'll play a few clips of that. Now, if you don't know Call Her Daddy, that's perfectly fine. It's a very large, it's like the female Joe Rogan podcast in the sense that it's huge. So Call Her Daddy was Alex Cooper and Sophia, and they started this podcast on Barstool. They might have had an episode or two before they went on to Barstool, but then it blew up, and they had this lucrative a sort of revenue share, not revenue share, but they had bonus structures where they got paid something like maybe like up to $400,000 for their first couple of years, which was really good. But they were selling a ton of merchandise. They were a huge podcast. They tried to negotiate their way out. And again, I might have this slightly wrong, but I have very much had a lot of interest in this. They tried to negotiate their way out of the podcast, but Barstool was like, look, your contract ends in a year. We'll give you the IP, the intellectual property, which they didn't have to do. Barstool could have held on to the podcast, but obviously the co-hosts weren't happy. They got into a fight over what to do about it and ended up breaking up, the co-host. So her partner left, and then she ended up taking the deal with Barstool to hold on to the podcast. And because she took the deal and her partner didn't, she received 100% of the intellectual property of the podcast, which, drum roll, after that year, which by the way, the year went by very fast at Barstool. After that year went by, now look at her net worth. $98 million. Alexander Cooper is worth $98 million. I think it was a 60. Yeah. She signs an exclusive deal with Spotify worth $60 million. So she's making almost $500,000 per episode. And again, she still owns the IP. She's just licensing it out to Spotify. So just like Joe Rogan, when this deal's over, she'll still own the podcast and do whatever she wants with it. This was wild. This was the bubble popping for the podcast world. Like, it was one thing for Joe Rogan to get 100 million. This is somebody who's not, she's very young, not that established in the podcasting world, but has a huge voice and a huge following. Anyway, I say all that just to remind people that it's more important that you own your intellectual property than anything else. It's a big deal. So we're going to get into a few different clips here. And again, this is only on Spotify, so I have to play for you guys the audio only. But let's go first clip at 9-minute mark. She's talking with Nick, who, by the way, has done a good job of owning his own IP as well. And when we talk about intellectual property, we just get to remember, people like Grocery Store Joe, he works for the Bachelor producers in the sense that he works for them in a podcast. And we always talk about don't rent out your time. So they're able to make a 6-figure deal, which is very nice. But trust me when I say Nick Viall is probably making a lot more money because he owns all the content. Kind of like while I make my content on YouTube, I don't work through some sort of other network who gets a percentage of everything I get. I get what I get. That's me. So anyway, just a good example if you're content creators to not sell. And because trust me, I get an email every single day. Hey, join our YouTube network team. No, thanks. I'll pass. All right, let's play a couple of clips here.
That amount of validation being given to you on a daily basis, that's just not natural.
No, I always try to say, like, what other people think of us is none of our business, but we're exposed to, like, everyone's opinions of us. That's anyone. You don't even have to be a public figure these days. Like,
100%.
How many people are walking around with, like, 200 friends, like, they actually talk to, but, like, you go on your Instagram account and you have access to, like, you post something, and now Diane down the street is like giving her 2 cents about like how you brushed your hair that day, and it's just like, fuck, I should have not parted my hair, whatever the fuck.
What for you, Nick, is something that like gets to you? Like when you're reading those and you're like, fuck, man, I'm kind of spiraling. Like, what is it?
I mean, I have like, you know, with my show, like I have a large audience of women, which I really like, I don't take for granted. I'm really grateful for. And I try to listen as much as talk to my audience. And so it can be like, I guess, hurtful when you get like certain critics who are like, why the fuck would I listen to this guy, like this, you know, and stuff like that, which I totally get. And I've expected it at certain times, but it's just, I think when you put a lot of effort into doing it the right way or doing it a certain way, and you know your critics probably have no idea what you're doing, like they're not actually listening to your stuff, or they're you know,
I love it. He's basically saying Bachelor Nation's so huge that all the people that leave negative comments aren't his fans in the first place. Because obviously, if you look, there's so many comments that are like, "Oh my gosh, what, you know, I didn't know this guy was still relevant." Like these types of things, and it's like it just doesn't. Those comments just don't matter. Those aren't people that are going to buy your book when it comes out. They're not going to support you when you have kids. They're not relevant, but they exist, and they're kind of, I mean, haters.
Out of it, and you have this like sense of wanting to convince all your critics about who, like, no, like, especially like my first season, I was the villain and I got a ton of criticism, and I would meet people in person, and so they'd be like, oh my God, you're so much different.
Yeah, that's how it works. So I'm sure it's been an interesting crash course that he's had as far as overcoming needing to be a people pleaser. Let's push forward.
Was launching the podcast a conscious effort by you to reframe that like Bachelor bad guy narrative that most people had about you?
No, I mean, I think after that, because that was after me being done with The Bachelor, and at that point I felt pretty, you know, confident about my public persona. Like, when you're considered the edgy guy in Bachelor Nation, that's not very edgy.
That's actually such a good point. Like, yeah. Nick's such a bad guy. I'm like, no.
Like, okay, but sure. Like, for the first time in my life, I was edgy. I was like, cool. But
that's a good point.
Yeah. So I didn't have this, like, I didn't feel like I was trying to, like, there was no, like, goal of rebranding. It was just, I wanted to do this. I had friends who had done it, had some success. So I just kind of waited for the right situation. You know, it's interesting because when you started Call Her Daddy, like, it was a big idea for me to like own my IP. And I remember like when I followed your story very closely, just because of like I was just kind of involved, like on a personal level. Like I've learned a lot from you just watching you from afar.
Don't rent out your time. Nick knows it. I know it. You know it. Don't rent out your time. Own your IP if you have the chance. You might not make as much money up front, but you might be worth a lot more in the long term. That's just the idea of kind of wealth building, right? All right, let's go to this last clip where he brings Natalie in and discusses how they kind of went from, I don't even want to say friends with benefits, whatever you would call just a casual person you were seeing, to being official.
Wanted him to know that that's where I was at and that I did like him
Natalie
and I did want to date him if he happened to be feeling the same way.
So Nick, you said no.
Well, I mean, at first when she said it, I just remember being like, wow, like you're not used to that. You're used to the, what are we? I think a lot of people in these situations where if you're like hesitant or you're just like have nerves about like if it's something you should do, you're waiting for that like what are we conversation. But like Natalie walked in, she's like, so listen, I'm just going to tell you something. I'm not really like, I think we should date, and here's why, you know. And it was just like,
to be fair, I did the same with Tasha, my fiance. She was the one who was like probably a little skittish about getting into a relationship because she didn't want her heart broken and all these things. And I was like, no, I think we're doing the right steps, so we need to move forward. And then once I broke through that level, there was so much more trust that came. So I actually can relate to Natalie here.
Like, that's hot. You know, it was very intoxicating. And because, you know, what we talked about earlier, like she went for what she wanted. She knew herself, she knew her worth, but she still like chose to put herself out there, show vulnerability. And I just saw like this really powerful person. Like the reason at the time I just was, listen, I think I had been single for a long time, like outside of the show. And, you know, that's the downside. Like I got really comfortable with being single. I think being single is an amazing thing that I think people should just have to stop apologizing for. But at the same time, you know, I got a little cynical and a little, I started every dating situation, I had this habit of like poking holes in it. You know, like we're looking for ways it could go wrong. At the time, she lived in Georgia, I lived in LA.
That's a big one.
She is a surgical technologist. I'm fucking doing podcasts. It's just like, I don't know. Like, what is she gonna move to LA? Like, are we really ready for that? So I just had a lot of anxiety about like all the ways it wouldn't like work out. So like I'm really incredibly thankful that she had just the belief in I guess us, and the confidence to really put herself out there, because it's like, and I just remember, because at the time I was like, I don't think we should, and she just goes, okay.
I'm interested, Natalie, with you though, like when finally he said no, you then started dating other people.
I mean, I was kind of dating other people throughout.
Right.
And
by the way, some people are asking about these microphones. Yeah, while I don't know what mics these are, it appears to me that this is like a hotel. Like maybe I think Caller Daddy's based out of New York, so she probably got a hotel room in LA. I mean, imagine having $60 million to like for production value. I would at least have 1 or 2 assistants setting up and editing and doing all the post. I mean, golly, I know so many talented podcasters that don't make a penny, and I totally understand. She got an opportunity and she captured it. Absolutely. But there's so many good podcasters out there. It's just wild, the discrepancy.
I mean, nothing serious. I just was talking to other people, going on dates, whatever. And I kind of just every couple of months would check in with Nick and be like, just letting you know, like, I do still want to date you. Like, you're at the top of my list.
And how did he take that usually?
There was a couple more no's involved.
Oh, God. Yeah. It's so harsh with the no also.
Well, it wasn't like no. It was just like, I just don't.
You're not ready.
Yeah, I just don't think I can do it, you know.
And then,
all right, so there they are. And of course, you can go listen or watch the full thing if you want. Now, of course, you know, whenever I break down one of these podcasts, I go, what's the story here? And then Yahoo News. Oh, you know, Yahoo News. Boy, has there ever been a bigger fall from grace than Yahoo? What? I mean, MySpace, maybe. I think Yahoo. Anyway, Bachelor Nick Viall, 41, says starting a relationship with Natalie Joy, 23, gave him anxiety because of their age gap. That seems to be like the common thread for haters. Oh, the age gap. What's wrong with him? Women his own age don't want to date him. All these different things. And it's like, look, we're all just emotionally on our journey in a different way. Maybe Nick, maybe he's a little less mature for a 41-year-old, and maybe she's a little more mature. Who the hell am I? I'm 37. I'm right on his butt. And I don't feel mature at all. My fiance's in her mid-30s, but it doesn't, you know, when we use age to our advantage, we say, oh, age is just a number, just whatever. But then when we want to like make fun of people, we go, oh, this is problematic, this and that. And you go, look, if they're happy and they're not harming anybody else, so be it. Hey, does he get his heart ripped out of his sleeve someday? Maybe. Or maybe she does. Or maybe they live happily ever after. It's not going to be any different than any other relationships that exist. Either it works out or it doesn't. You still got to play the game. So good on Nick for finally taking that leap after she kind of pursued him. Might be a little different if it were the other way around, but she pursued him. Good on him. And however the relationship ends up going, kind of nice that they're sharing their story. A lot of people go, oh, you know, like when he gives advice, there's a lot of women that probably like his advice, and there's a lot of women that probably don't. And that's Bachelor for you, folks. God knows if I'm in the wrong chat room, people hear my name and they go, oh, Dave Neal, what? This guy mustache, you know, this ketosis guy, whatever, you know, whatever. They're gonna go, you know, who knows? You know, you can't please everybody, and that's the point of the story. And the point is, get your intellectual property in order. Don't sell that shit to anybody. And that might be it for me, folks. Everyone have a good weekend. I have weekend videos happening on the Dave Neal Show if you want to check that out. But unless there's any breaking news, I might go to the beach this weekend. Whatever. This mustache needs some sun. Talk to you guys later. Much love. Bye, everybody.